This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We're going to get into the cowboy cocktail plan right now. I think 2012 or 2013, I attended a legal conference in Colorado, in Denver. And a couple of people were throwing around this phrase, and it was very catchy. And it's called a cowboy cocktail. I don't think anyone has patented that or registered that phrase. I think it's pretty much public domain because I've seen people who are familiar with the structure use that term. But it does explain what we're doing. So what we're doing is we're registering you within Wyoming. There are probably about, I think it's close to 11 now. But when we first started this some time ago, there were only a handful of states that even had protective measures codified in law, meaning that as a part of their laws, their local laws, they protect assets. And so I think in the 90s, there were like 4 or 5. Then in the early 2000s, it went up to like maybe 6 or 7. And then around 2012, there were 9. So it's getting more and more popular. And so one of the best, and I've done the research myself and figured out what's going to work out better for my clients, and that was Wyoming. Oddly enough, the Nevada people, they either have a huge marketing budget or whatever, but they tend to be more popular. But if you look at the laws, and I know a Nevada attorney, and we've had this conversation before, so but their laws aren't very protective. But the people who push the LLCs and the other things that they do out of there seem to have a huge marketing budget because they're all over the place talking about the Nevada laws. And you could probably do a Google search and find out how many people have been sued out of a Nevada organization that didn't hold its weight in court. So just be careful with that. On the other hand, you could Google Wyoming as well. And at the time I did my research, there were none. Now, of course, I did that research probably, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. And so unless something happened in the last couple of years, and I think I would have heard of it if that were true, you're not going to find that for Wyoming entities because they are solid and you have to go through a lot to get to them. And so most litigants are not willing to go through all of that. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go into my slide here. And so a cowboy cocktail is basically using a domestic asset protection trust. So that first large square on the left side of the page there, that is a domestic asset protection trust. That's what DAPT stands for. And that domestic asset protection trust is going to be the owner of the LLCs. The LLCs are in triangle form there. One LLC is a trustee. That's an LLC as well, but I don't list that one as a numbered LLC because that's going to be the basics of every one we put together because that is part of the law that you have to have a domestic. When I say domestic, I mean within the state of Wyoming, you have to have a domestic agent and a domestic trustee. And so those will be constants, regardless of how many LLCs we put in place. Those 3 elements, the domestic asset protection trust, the LLC trustee, and the Wyoming agent. Those are all going to be constants. Now, the real protection here is the operating agreement. It's below the LLC because it is the operating agreement that protects those LLCs if anything were to happen. Now, when I say anything, I mean if someone were to sue LLC 1, LLC 1 will be protected by those laws codified within Wyoming that says that the only remedy at law available to a litigant is going to be a charging order. Let me explain what a charging order is. Say, for instance, my scenario that I've used a couple of slides ago, where I had a rental property, a multifamily rental property in LLC A, and I was sued. So when I was sued, this is all example. It's not true. This is just scenario for presentation. When I was sued, they got a charging order. They won in court, and the judge says, okay, this person owes you $100,000. And so they got a charging order for $100,000. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me as an LLC owner because I have to distribute 100 from my LLC before that litigant receives any money. A couple of things are going to happen during that time. They're holding a charging order saying that they're due $100,000. Well, they may have to claim that on their tax returns for that year, even though I didn't distribute anything. And so if that's not enough motivation to negotiate, then it gets even difficult. It gets even more difficult in Wyoming because Wyoming says that that is their only remedy at law is to hold that charging order. Now, how is that different in any other state? Well, I'm in Massachusetts, and we don't have such a protective law here on the books in Massachusetts. So if a litigant wanted to sue me, they could sue me, and then if I decide not to distribute any assets from my LLC, they could take me back to court and ask the judge to allow them to foreclose on my interest, my ownership of that LLC. If he gives them that, then they can take over the ownership interests. They can force distribution out of my LLC. And so the only way that I can get around that is to have the parent company in Wyoming. So if my Wyoming parent company everything's in place, then laws of Wyoming will say that, hey, there's no foreclosure in the state of Wyoming because our law says that the most that you can get is your charging order. And you have to wait until I decide to make distribution to get anything from that. So it becomes discouraging for a litigant, and that's what we want. We want to discourage them from going after us. And that Wyoming law does that for us. And so that's why we choose Wyoming to set up our entities in Wyoming. So the way the structure looks here, so we have a domestic asset protection trust as the owner of the LLCs. We have LLC number 1 and LLC number 2. So those are separate entities. We don't commingle the equipment. We don't commingle the vehicles. We don't commingle the cash or any assets. They're not commingled. They're totally separate and apart. We never commingle our personal assets with our business assets. And we have that local trustee there because it's in law. We have to have a local trustee. That local trustee can be an LLC formed in Wyoming for the purposes of acting as the management or the trustee of that domestic asset protection trust. Okay? And then the local agent. We have to have an agent because we have to have a local agent to receive service. So if someone were to sue me and they were to go after me in Wyoming, then they would serve my agent in Wyoming. That makes it all legal. That agent would contact me right away and say, hey, we have service papers here. You need to respond. And that's how that works. Okay, so I think that's it. If you guys have questions, go ahead and forward them to either myself or Stefan, and then we'll do our best at getting back to you with that. I'm going to go on to the Caribbean cocktail, which is it's sort of structured the same way, but with a couple of different nuances that you'll see in our next video. All right, thanks guys. We'll see you in the next video.
The recording has stopped.
Fantastic. Okay. So after the Caribbean slide, is there another slide after that? And the reason I'm setting up for that is because at the end of that slide, I could come in and be like, hey, David, that's absolutely amazing. So we're also going to be inviting you back for live calls here and there as well. And if you have any special things coming up, we'll obviously let everybody know. Any types of events or things that you have coming up. So I'm going to do that kind of a thing, but I'll do it at the last slide. So just let me know.
Okay, so it's not the last slide. The last slide is the CTA, Corporation Transparency Act.
Okay.
And the Caribbean will be short because it's basically a rehash with just the local police entities and not the Wyoming entities.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and hit record on this. So you want to change it to the
yeah, there we go. Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome back, guys. Now we're gonna extend the last lesson, which was the Wyoming structure, into the Caribbean cocktail structure, which